Welcome to Ancient Astronauts. I'm your host, Ben Carter, and in today's episode, we travel to the remote cliffs of Mali, West Africa, where a mysterious tribe has guarded knowledge passed down through generations, knowledge that appears impossible for an ancient, isolated culture to possess. The Dogon people speak of a star invisible to the naked eye, orbiting a larger one in a 50-year cycle, details only confirmed by modern science in the 20th century. Yet the Dogon have known it for centuries. Where did this knowledge come from? And could it point to contact with something not of this earth? Nestled in the Bandiagara escarpment of Mali, the Dogon people have lived for centuries in relative isolation, preserving a rich and complex culture rooted in mythology, astronomy, and ritual. Their remote villages, carved into the cliff faces and sheltered by ancient stone granaries, seem untouched by time. The Dogon are known for their intricate cosmology, a system of beliefs that explains the origin of the universe, the structure of the stars, and the nature of life itself. But what sets them apart is not just the sophistication of their worldview, it is the striking accuracy of their astronomical knowledge. Long before telescopes made it possible, the Dogon described the existence of a companion star to Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky. In their oral traditions, passed from elder priests known as Dogon to the next generation, they speak of Sirius as a system composed of more than one star. According to their myths, the brightest star, called Sigi Tolo, the star of Sigi, is orbited by a smaller, invisible star named Po Tolo. This second star, they say, is the densest thing in the universe, incredibly heavy and small, and completes its orbit every 50 years. Western astronomers didn't confirm the existence of Sirius B until 1862, when it was first observed through a telescope. Its weight, density, and 50-year elliptical orbit were only calculated in the 20th century. And yet, the Dogon have preserved these facts in ritual ceremonies, masks, and carvings that are far older. They not only knew of Sirius B, but described it as composed of a material denser than anything on Earth. They even detail its orbital pattern, knowledge that would have required advanced tools and mathematics far beyond the capability of any pre-industrial society. Their astronomical understanding doesn't stop with Sirius. Dogon cosmology includes references to a third star in the system, known to them as Emiya, which they claim is larger and lighter than Po Tolo, and possibly has its own satellite. While Sirius C has yet to be conclusively identified by modern astronomers, there have been tantalizing suggestions of its presence in gravitational anomalies. The Dogon also describe the orbits of planets, the rings of Saturn, and even the spiral structure of the Milky Way. What makes these claims even more extraordinary is the Dogon's apparent lack of technological means to acquire such knowledge. Their tools are traditional, their lifestyle agrarian, their villages often without electricity or modern infrastructure. They had no telescopes, no written language until recently, and no recorded history of outside contact with scientists or explorers prior to the 20th century. And yet their understanding of the stars aligns uncannily with what modern science has only recently confirmed. Some researchers have attempted to attribute this knowledge to contact with French anthropologists in the 1930s, who studied the Dogon extensively. But those claims struggle to explain why this information is embedded in centuries-old rituals and ceremonies predating that contact. It appears in their stories of creation, their calendar systems, and their sacred dances, elements of culture not easily or quickly rewritten. The Dogon say their knowledge was given to them by beings they call the Nommo, described as amphibious, serpent-like entities who came from the sky in a spinning vessel accompanied by fire and thunder. According to their oral history, the Nommo arrived in ancient times and brought with them not only moral laws and agricultural techniques, but detailed knowledge of the cosmos. They were revered as teachers, not gods, sentient, intelligent beings from a distant world whose legacy lives on in ritual and stone. The story of the Nommo is central to the Dogon worldview, and unlike any creation myth found in neighboring tribes or regional traditions. These beings are not abstract deities or symbolic spirits. They are described in precise physical terms. Amphibious in nature, they descended from the sky in what is often translated as vessel that spun and emitted thunder, landing with great noise and wind. The Dogon say the Nommo came from a distant star in the Sirius system and brought order to the world. They are credited with teaching language, agriculture, metallurgy, and most curiously, astronomy. Descriptions of the Nommo are startlingly detailed. They are said to have a fish-like appearance, with features that blend aquatic and humanoid traits. Their arrival, according to the Dogon, was not singular. It was part of a series of visitations. In their myths, the Nommo descended in an ark, a vessel that radiated fire and shattered the sky. The imagery, consistent across Dogon oral tradition, resembles what modern eyes might call a spacecraft. After their descent, they established contact with the first humans, transmitting knowledge that became the foundation of Dogon society. This mythology is not tucked away in obscure corners of Dogon belief. It is embedded in their most sacred ceremonies. The Sigui ceremony, for example, is performed once every 60 years to mark the cycle of Sirius B's orbit, a ritual so precise that it aligns with the astronomical calendar. During this event, masked dancers perform movements that are said to reflect the spinning descent of the Nommo's ark. The ceremony includes chants and symbols referencing star patterns, elliptical orbits, and events that correspond closely with scientific observations of the Sirius system. Even more remarkable are the symbolic carvings and artifacts associated with these rituals. Some Dogon artifacts depict what appear to be star charts, planetary orbits, and even spiral galaxies. There are stone diagrams that show the position of Sirius and its companions, and complex symbolic codes etched into ceremonial masks that, when translated, speak of celestial movement, binary stars, and cosmic rhythms. The Dogon themselves claim this knowledge is not metaphorical. It was given directly to them by the Nommo. The belief isn't presented as allegory, but as historical truth, handed down orally for generations. Priests known as Hogon serve as the keepers of this sacred wisdom, initiating only those deemed spiritually and intellectually ready to receive it. This tight control over transmission helps explain the consistency of the Dogon's astronomical claims over centuries. The question that continues to trouble researchers is how such isolated people acquired such precise knowledge. The Dogon do not navigate by the stars, nor do they possess observational instruments. Their cosmology is not based on speculation or rough patterns in the night sky. It reflects an understanding of stellar mass, orbital mechanics, and cosmic structures that can only be confirmed with the aid of modern science. If their knowledge is indigenous, it would require a complete re-evaluation of what early humans were capable of understanding through observation alone. Skeptics point to cultural contamination, suggesting the Dogon may have absorbed modern astronomical concepts from early 20th century anthropologists. But critics of this theory argue that there is no clear record of such information being shared during those early studies, and no indication that the Dogon altered their myths after contact. In fact, most of the core elements of their cosmology were documented before the scientific community fully understood Sirius B. The idea that ancient knowledge could have been inherited, rather than invented, reframes the debate entirely. If the Dogon did not deduce this knowledge themselves, then who or what was responsible for planting it in their culture so long ago? And why would such information be entrusted to a small, isolated tribe on the cliffs of West Africa? The answers may lie not in skepticism, but in the possibility that ancient contact, far from being a fringe theory, might be a hidden chapter of human history. Archaeological and ethnographic investigations into Dogon culture have uncovered layers of symbolism embedded in their daily lives, tools, art, and sacred structures, many of which reinforce their celestial narratives. One of the most striking examples is the Kanaga mask, worn during ritual dances. At first glance, it appears to be a simple geometric form, but its vertical and horizontal lines, intersecting in a cross-like structure, are interpreted by the Dogon as representing the axis of the universe. The vertical plane connects the heavens and the earth. The horizontal reflects the material world. This symbolic cosmology aligns eerily well with the concept of multi-dimensional existence described in modern physics and cosmology. Other ritual artifacts mirror known astronomical layouts. Carved stones and wooden boards illustrate what appear to be elliptical orbits and binary star systems. The Nommo themselves are sometimes depicted in forms that defy standard human representation. Elongated heads, wide-set eyes, fish-like tails, features that recall descriptions of extraterrestrial beings found in myths across the globe. Their symbols for Sirius often include concentric circles, spirals, and cluster points, visual metaphors that resemble both ancient petroglyphs in other parts of the world and contemporary representations of gravitational systems. Beyond artifacts, the Dogon's sacred architecture also seems guided by astronomical principles. Many of their granaries and ceremonial houses are constructed in alignment with celestial points. Some entrances face specific stars, and the spacing between buildings follows ratios seen in planetary orbital patterns. The significance placed on numbers such as 50, Sirius B's orbital period, repeats throughout their mythic cycles, timekeeping systems, and ceremonial intervals. These aren't just aesthetic choices. They appear to be calculated, consistent, and deliberate. One of the most enigmatic elements of Dogon cosmology is their detailed description of Po, the seed from which the universe was created. It is described as infinitely dense, containing the essence of all matter, and initiating the movement of life through vibration. The parallels to the concept of the Big Bang and singularity theory are difficult to ignore. The Dogon assert that from Po, everything spiraled outward, driven by invisible forces. Their understanding of matter, energy, and motion, expressed through metaphor and myth, shares uncanny overlaps with the principles underlying quantum mechanics and cosmic expansion. The ceremonial drum rhythms and chants used in their rituals also reflect cosmic order. Some scholars analyzing the patterns in these rituals found mathematical structures based on ratios similar to those governing planetary resonance. The Dogon didn't use formal mathematics, yet their oral traditions preserve complex systems of numerical thought, ones that align with universal patterns seen in nature and astrophysics. Perhaps most intriguing is their claim that the Nommo arrived not only from Sirius, but came to restore balance after a disruption. The myth tells of a being among the Nommo who rebelled, creating chaos, disorder, and a break in the cosmic harmony. The others descended to restore equilibrium. This echoes narratives from ancient Sumer, Mesoamerica, and India, where star beings or gods intervene to guide humanity after a celestial or moral fall. These stories are uncannily similar despite vast geographic and cultural separation, suggesting a shared mythic memory, or perhaps a shared historical experience, filtered through different cultural lenses. Even the Dogon calendar is based on the cycle of Sirius, not the sun or moon, an anomaly in agricultural societies. Their most sacred rituals are timed to align with the heliacal rising of Sirius, a practice once shared by the ancient Egyptians in their own veneration of that star. But unlike the Egyptians, the Dogon preserved not only the star's importance, but its complex, invisible characteristics. This commitment to tracking an unseen companion star across generations suggests that their ceremonies were more than symbolic. They may have served as a way of marking an event, or remembering a presence they believed would return. Academic responses to the Dogon-Sirius mystery have been wide-ranging, with opinions divided sharply along disciplinary and philosophical lines. Some anthropologists and historians approach the claims with deep skepticism, attributing the Dogon's apparent knowledge of Sirius B to cultural contamination during early ethnographic research. The primary figures often cited in this narrative are French anthropologists Marcel Griot and Germaine Dieterlen, who lived among the Dogon in the 1930s and 1940s. They published extensively on Dogon cosmology, asserting that the tribe possessed astronomical knowledge that defied explanation. Critics argue that Griot may have misunderstood or misrepresented aspects of Dogon belief, either due to language barriers or the interpretive lens through which he viewed their mythology. Others have suggested that he introduced astronomical concepts during his time with the Dogon, and that the knowledge later attributed to them was unconsciously or intentionally fed to them through suggestive questioning. However, this theory faces serious challenges. The Dogon priests who provided the information were highly trained oral historians, part of a sacred lineage whose purpose was to preserve exact cosmological teachings. Their narratives were complex, consistent, and deeply rooted in ritual and daily life, features difficult to reconcile with a hasty reinterpretation of foreign ideas. Further complicating the contamination argument is the timing. Some of the information Griol documented, including specific details about Sirius B's mass, orbit and density, had not yet been widely publicized in scientific literature when he recorded them. These characteristics of Sirius B, such as its intense density and 50-year orbital period, were still being debated among astronomers at the time. If Griol had somehow introduced this knowledge, he would have had to rely on extremely current, speculative science and translated it in ways that embedded seamlessly into a centuries-old belief system. This seems implausible to many researchers. Astronomers, for their part, generally remain cautious. They acknowledge that the Dogon's description of a dense, invisible companion star is extraordinarily accurate, but they often downplay its significance by suggesting coincidence or reinterpretation. Some posit that the Dogon assigned new meanings to existing myths in response to conversations with researchers or missionaries, although no concrete evidence supports such an adaptive process. Others point to the possibility of previous contact with travelers or traders who might have passed through Mali over the centuries, yet no historical documentation supports that this contact included precise astrophysical data. A more nuanced academic perspective holds that oral traditions can preserve surprisingly accurate empirical knowledge when encoded in ritual, story, and symbol. From this viewpoint, it's not impossible that careful skywatching, combined with mythologizing over generations, could produce accurate approximations of celestial behavior. But this theory falters when faced with the Dogon's awareness of Sirius B's density, a feature that cannot be observed from Earth, no matter how sharp the eye or long the observation. Then there are the comparative mythologists, who note that similar accounts of advanced knowledge appear across cultures. From the Babylonian Enuma Elish to the Mayan Popol Vuh, stories persist of beings who descended from the sky, gifted mankind with knowledge and then departed. Scholars who lean toward a symbolic interpretation see these myths as archetypes, psychological templates embedded in the human imagination. But even this doesn't fully explain how the Dogon could preserve technical astronomical knowledge with such specificity while disconnected from other scientific civilizations. Ultimately, the academic debate remains unresolved. The theories that attempt to reduce the Dogon knowledge to coincidence or misunderstanding often generate more questions than answers. As new data emerges, both from continued study of the Sirius system and from renewed anthropological work, more scholars are beginning to admit that the Dogon puzzle deserves reconsideration. Not because it confirms alien contact, but because it may expose hidden gaps in how we understand cultural transmission, ancient science, and the origin of knowledge itself. Beyond the realm of academia lies a landscape of speculation shaped by researchers who argue that the Dogon's knowledge cannot be explained by conventional means. These theorists point to the extraordinary precision of Dogon cosmology, not just as evidence of ancient intellect, but as a possible record of direct contact with non-human intelligence. The argument hinges not only on what the Dogon knew, but how they describe the origin of that knowledge. From beings who descended from the sky, taught humanity, and then returned to the stars. At the center of this perspective is the assertion that the Nommo were not mythical deities, but biological entities, extraterrestrials whose arrival was interpreted by the Dogon through a spiritual lens. The amphibious appearance of the Nommo, combined with their association with water and descent from the heavens, leads some theorists to conclude they were adapted to aquatic environments, perhaps originating from a planet in the Sirius system with conditions vastly different from Earth. The Dogon description of the Nommo's descent as accompanied by fire and thunder is often compared to the noise, light, and propulsion associated with spacecraft. Proponents of the ancient contact theory note that similar aquatic or serpent-like beings appear across global mythologies. In Sumerian texts, the Apkallu were wise fishmen sent by the gods to bring civilization. In Mesoamerican tradition, the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl descends from the sky bearing knowledge. In ancient India, the Nagas, semi-divine beings, part serpent, part human, are said to dwell in underground or underwater realms and possess superior wisdom. These recurring archetypes raise the question, are these merely cultural coincidences, or are they fragmented memories of a singular event experienced by diverse peoples? Some researchers go further, proposing that Sirius itself has long been a point of origin for such visitors. The star holds sacred significance not only for the Dogon, but also for the ancient Egyptians, who associated Sirius, known to them as Sopdet, with the goddess Isis, and used its heliacal rising to mark the beginning of the Nile's flood season. The parallels between Dogon and Egyptian reverence for Sirius, despite the geographic and temporal distance, lead theorists to consider the possibility of a shared ancient influence, one that radiated outward from a single advanced source. These ideas, though dismissed by mainstream historians, gain traction due to their ability to connect unexplained phenomena across time and space. The suggestion that knowledge was seeded into early human cultures by visitors from another star system offers an elegant, if provocative, solution to many lingering mysteries. Sudden appearances of advanced astronomy, the rapid rise of agriculture, and the emergence of monumental architecture, often without clear developmental precursors. In this context, the Dogon are not an isolated anomaly, but a vital key, a culture that preserved the memory of an encounter with remarkable fidelity. If the Nommo were indeed beings from another world, then the Dogon priests became custodians of a legacy intended to survive the rise and fall of civilizations. Their myths, ceremonies, and symbols would serve not only as spiritual practice, but as a repository of encoded information, awaiting a future generation capable of deciphering its true origin. Skeptics argue that such theories leap too quickly from mystery to myth, from anomaly to alien. But those who advocate for the ancient contact hypothesis counter that the sheer number of converging clues, symbolic, astronomical, ritualistic, across unrelated cultures suggests more than coincidence. If these stories and symbols are the scattered pieces of a forgotten truth, then the Dogon tradition may be one of the clearest surviving records of a contact that shaped the course of human history, not as myth, but as memory. As the threads of tradition, science, and speculation are woven together, the picture that emerges around the Dogon becomes increasingly complex. What begins as a cultural curiosity, a remote tribe with inexplicably accurate knowledge of an invisible star, quickly deepens into a multifaceted enigma, one that challenges assumptions about the sources and survival of ancient knowledge. Each layer of their cosmology, each ceremonial practice and symbol, seems to hint at something larger, not merely a glimpse into prehistoric astronomy, but a record of intentional transmission, preserved in forms that defy the erosion of time. At the heart of the Dogon's cosmological framework is an obsession with cycles, cosmic, spiritual, and societal. The 50-year cycle of Sirius B's orbit is mirrored in their sacred Sigui ceremony, performed only once every 6 decades, and orchestrated with such mathematical precision that its timing has remained unbroken for centuries. The entire society prepares for it years in advance, marking celestial alignments, constructing new masks, and invoking ancestral spirits said to have witnessed the original descent of the Nommo. This level of ritual dedication suggests that the cycle is more than symbolic. It is functional, possibly even imperative. It marks not only the passage of time, but perhaps also a remembrance of an ancient event, timed to the stars. The Dogon belief that the Nommo will one day return is a central pillar of their worldview. This concept of cyclical return echoes other prophetic traditions found across the ancient world, stories of gods or star beings who promised to come back when the time was right. In the Andes, Incan legends speak of Viracocha, a bearded deity who departed across the sea but vowed to return. The Hopi of North America tell of the Pahana, the lost white brother who will return with knowledge. In Sumerian lore, the Anunnaki are said to have left Earth, promising eventual reappearance. The Dogon version fits this template precisely. Beings from the stars who left behind sacred knowledge and a legacy, encoded in ritual and rhythm, to await their return. Even more compelling is the idea that the Dogon cosmology serves not just as a mythic record, but as a form of celestial instruction. The emphasis on spiral motion, elliptical paths, and resonant frequencies suggests an understanding of universal patterns, concepts not widely known until the development of modern physics. The Dogon concept of Po, the primordial seed as the source of all matter and vibration, mirrors the language of quantum fields and string theory. These parallels are not easily dismissed as metaphor. The Dogon do not speak in generalities. Their cosmology is specific, numerical, and tied to observable events in the sky. In their oral traditions, the Nommo are described not just as bringers of knowledge, but as engineers of order, entities tasked with repairing a broken cosmic balance. This motif recurs throughout their rituals: the balancing of male and female energies, the division of heaven and earth, the restoration of what was once shattered. If symbolic, these ideas reflect a deep-rooted spiritual framework focused on harmony and correction. If literal, they imply a form of intervention, an ancient encounter with beings whose purpose was not conquest, but stewardship. The Dogon appear to be aware of their unique place in this cosmological narrative. Their knowledge is not treated casually, nor is it openly shared with outsiders. Access to the deeper teachings requires years of initiation and spiritual preparation. This guarded transmission has protected their traditions from dilution or distortion, allowing elements of their cosmic story to survive intact, perhaps longer than any written text could endure. When these strands are pulled together, the precision of their astronomical data, the specificity of their myths, the ceremonial timing synced to star cycles, and the broader parallels across global traditions, they suggest something more than cultural idiosyncrasy. They suggest intent. The Dogon didn't just remember, they were preserving. And in doing so, they may have left behind one of the most compelling records of contact in human history, etched not in stone or steel, but in rhythm, ritual, and myth. In the final analysis, the mystery of the Dogon and their knowledge of Sirius B does not rest solely on astronomy, mythology, or the question of extraterrestrial contact. It rests in the convergence of all these elements, a convergence so precise and unlikely that it forces us to re-evaluate the boundaries between legend and fact, between science and story. The Dogon do not claim to have discovered the secrets of the stars through observation or calculation. They claim to have inherited them as part of a sacred trust passed down from beings not of this earth. That claim, however extraordinary, is rooted in a tradition that has remained internally consistent, uncorrupted by modern influence, and astonishingly accurate. For generations, these teachings were transmitted orally, woven into the fabric of Dogon ritual life, protected by elders and initiated priests. Their cultural isolation only strengthened the purity of this transmission. Unlike civilizations surrounded by constant flux or conquest, the Dogon lived in a rugged, remote environment that offered both protection and continuity. This stability allowed their cosmology to survive unbroken for centuries, perhaps millennia, untouched by the shifting sands of history that erased so much elsewhere. It is this continuity that makes their testimony difficult to dismiss. Had their stories evolved under pressure, merged with foreign beliefs, or changed with each generation, the mystery would dissolve into ambiguity. But they did not. The implications of their knowledge are far-reaching. If the Dogon did receive information from an advanced intelligence, human or otherwise, it suggests a hidden chapter in our past that mainstream history has yet to acknowledge. One in which knowledge was not built slowly through trial and error, but seeded deliberately, with intention. This concept, while controversial, aligns with similar patterns found across ancient cultures, civilizations that arose suddenly with advanced systems of agriculture, architecture, mathematics, and astronomy, without clear developmental precursors. If these cultures were guided, then by whom? And to what end? Even without invoking extraterrestrial contact, the Dogon raise urgent questions about human memory and transmission. How much knowledge has been lost to time? How many other oral traditions contain truths masked as myth? How often do we dismiss something as folklore simply because it does not conform to our expectations of how knowledge is acquired? The Dogon show us that truth can be preserved in places we least expect, in chants, dances, carved masks, and sacred numbers. And perhaps in the silence between ceremony and story, In the pauses handed down from teacher to apprentice lies a code waiting to be decoded. Sirius continues to shine in the night sky, bright and unwavering, its binary companion invisible to the naked eye yet undeniably present. And in a remote corner of Mali, the Dogon still mark its rhythms, still honour the cycle, still prepare for the return of the Nommo. They wait, not as passive observers, but as guardians of a story so old, so strange, and so precise that it may one day force a rewriting of our understanding of civilization itself. The real power of the Dogon legacy may not lie in what they know, but in how fiercely they have guarded that knowledge. In a world driven by data and evidence, they remind us that sometimes the greatest truths are not measured by instruments, but carried in memory, guarded in ritual, and hidden in plain sight, until the time comes when someone is ready to ask the right question. As the Dogon story draws into sharper focus, a final dimension begins to emerge, one not solely about where the knowledge came from, but why it matters. The Dogon's guardianship of this ancient wisdom may not have been accidental. Their culture, their remote geography, and their deliberate secrecy form a kind of preservation chamber, an intentional isolation that has kept the knowledge intact through centuries of upheaval elsewhere. If this knowledge was indeed entrusted to them by an advanced intelligence, then it wasn't just a gift, it was a responsibility. Every component of Dogon cosmology is structured with layers, symbolic, astronomical, spiritual. The spiral, for example, appears repeatedly in their artwork and carvings, representing not only cosmic motion but the flow of life itself. In modern physics, the spiral mirrors the shape of galaxies, the structure of DNA, even the unfolding of time in space-time geometry. For the Dogon, this symbol is not decorative. It is sacred. It represents their understanding of the universe and their place within it. The spiral is echoed in their ceremonial dances, in their architecture, and in the story of creation itself. It may be that these rituals serve as more than remembrance. They could be a kind of key, a mnemonic cipher that preserves a deeper system of knowledge. The Dogon also understand the importance of duality. Many of their myths are built around pairs, male and female, order and chaos, sky and earth, Sirius A and Sirius B. This isn't merely metaphorical. Duality is embedded in their worldview as a reflection of cosmic truth. The idea that energy exists in balance, that motion and stillness are part of the same force, that life itself is born from harmony and disruption. All of these beliefs resonate uncannily with principles in quantum mechanics, string theory, and even ancient Eastern philosophies. Yet the Dogon arrived at them without telescopes, particle accelerators, or philosophy departments. Their laboratory was ritual. Their textbooks were the stars. What makes their knowledge so compelling is not just its content, but its structure. Dogon cosmology is encoded in story, but it functions like a system. Initiates spend years learning the layers, not simply to memorize them, but to internalize a worldview that transcends time. The knowledge isn't just told, it's lived. Passed in symbols, chants, architecture, and ceremony, it is distributed across media in ways that resist corruption. Unlike written texts that can be edited or destroyed, Dogon knowledge is diffused throughout the culture. To erase it would require dismantling their entire way of life. The final question becomes, if this was a message, who was it for, and when? If the Dogon were entrusted with truths that modern science only now begins to understand, then perhaps the preservation of that knowledge wasn't just for them. It was meant for someone else, at a later time, when we had the tools to recognize its value. In this context, the Dogon become not just receivers of knowledge, but messengers across millennia. Custodians of a transmission meant to endure. Whether one believes in ancient astronauts, lost civilizations, or a far more advanced prehistory than we've imagined, the Dogon stand as a living contradiction to accepted history. They should not know what they know, and yet they do. Their legacy challenges every assumption about the origin of science, the nature of myth, and the trajectory of human development. It calls into question the linear narrative of progress, and instead suggests cycles, rises and falls of civilizations, guided perhaps not only by the hand of man, but by something watching from above. In the end, it's not the certainty of contact that makes the Dogon remarkable. It's the persistence of the mystery, the refusal of their knowledge to fade or fracture. And in that refusal, perhaps we find a mirror, reflecting not only the enigma of our origins, but the potential that lies dormant in forgotten places, waiting to be remembered. In the silence of the Bandiagra cliffs, where wind whispers through stone granaries and rituals echo beneath starlit skies, the Dogon people continue their quiet guardianship of a story that defies time. Their chants, their symbols, their ceremonies are more than traditions. They are transmissions. Encoded in every mask, in every gesture, in every number is a message, a map of the cosmos, not just as it is seen, but as it is understood by beings whose perspective may not be bound to this world. The story of the Dogon is not simply a matter of anthropological intrigue or cultural wonder. It is a challenge to everything we assume about the origins of knowledge, the capacity of early humans, and the possibility that intelligence from beyond Earth has shaped the arc of human history. Their cosmology is not partial or abstract. It is specific, mathematical, and aligned with discoveries made only in the last century, and it predates those discoveries by generations, perhaps by thousands of years. Still, the mainstream remains cautious. The notion that an isolated tribe could hold ancient knowledge of invisible stars, orbital mechanics, and cosmic density without technological tools strains credulity. But in seeking to explain it away, we may be missing the larger point. Whether their knowledge came from celestial visitors or from a long-lost branch of human civilization, it serves as a reminder that we are not the beginning of knowledge. We are its inheritors. And not all of it came from trial and error. Some of it may have been given. The Dogon teach us that science and myth are not always opposites. Sometimes they are mirrors, each reflecting a piece of truth. In the Dogon worldview, there is no conflict between the spiritual and the scientific. The Nommo are not just deities or aliens. They are both and neither. They are the bearers of wisdom, the keepers of cycles, the engineers of equilibrium. In this synthesis lies a lesson. Perhaps our division between reason and belief, between material and metaphysical, is itself a limitation, one that prevents us from recognizing the full scope of what ancient knowledge might contain. As humanity continues to scan the skies, decode the genome, and push against the edges of the known universe, we are slowly uncovering what the Dogon have quietly preserved for centuries. The stars are not just distant lights. They are points of origin, destinations, and perhaps memory. In every orbit tracked, in every gravitational field mapped, we inch closer to confirming what an oral tradition in Mali has claimed all along. The question is no longer whether the Dogon knew. They did. The question is how and why. What force, cultural, cosmic, or otherwise, entrusted them with this knowledge? Was it meant to survive the collapse of some forgotten epoch? Was it meant to awaken something dormant in our collective history? Or was it a signal, waiting for us to become advanced enough to notice, to ask, to understand? Whatever the answer, the Dogon stand as a testament to the mystery of human origins. Their legacy is a portal, one carved not in steel or silicon, but in story, stone, and starlight. And through that portal, we are reminded that our past may be vaster, stranger, and more extraordinary than we ever imagined. Thanks for listening. This has been another episode of Ancient Astronauts. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to support the show, subscribe to Ancient Astronauts on Spotify. Subscribe now.